Gentlemen, you might be wondering why we're gathered here tonight and are being deprived of our usual routine of neglecting our wives and infant children. Well, now that we're like billions of dollars in debt after hinging the entire future of our company on a Jared Leto movie, I have been absolutely ravaging the bins outside my local Denny's trying to find as many rejected movie and show ideas that could save our asses, which I'm now going to pitch to you in the form of an extremely funny YouTube video. Most of the time when we find out about unmade shit, it's followed by like a week-long Twitter-wide digital funeral service mourning the loss of Titanfall 3. But every now and then, sometimes you can kind of see why this stuff didn't get made, and that it was probably for the best that we didn't end up getting, like, Hail Honey, I'm Home.
I'm a very, very bad Hitler.
And this Jim Carrey fish movie that is probably the scariest thing I've seen in my entire life. But I could easily spend the remaining 14 minutes of my life telling you about all of the non-stop heaters that they were cooking in the Godzilla writer's room, because the world is genuinely a worse place for us not getting to see him beat the shit out of Batman. And shout out to this other idea where he would have fought like the ghost of the OG Godzilla, not to be confused with the other one where Godzilla goes back in time to kill his past self, who is technically also his dad. Also, Anguirus was going to be there. And I love that guy. But then, some absolute visionary, fueled by the most available amount of fentanyl the 1950s had to offer, proposed they combined two of humanity's greatest contributions and also the occupants of both halves of my brain, Godzilla and boobs. Why aren't you clapping? And that's how we didn't get Bride of Godzilla. Now, I know that me saying that has probably immediately made you think of Godzilla with a massive rack, which actually wouldn't be too far off, but like, we'll get to that, okay? This one never got any further than like a story treatment in a language that I cannot read, so I am trusting entirely that the gist of this one was about a mad scientist making a giant hot robot daughter that also would have been naked for the sole purpose of turning Godzilla on. Yeah, no, that is actually what that says. Okay. Obviously, there was like a bit more to it, but we have only about like, what, 10 minutes before the bank seizes this entire company, so I'm just going to stick to the important parts, which is that it was somehow going to involve mermaids, giant fleas, and also Anguirus would have been there again. I fucking love that guy, dude. And for anyone that hasn't lost copious hours of their life on Godzilla movies, this wouldn't have been like that far off from the shit that the guy was normally getting up to, given that like his usual Friday involved fighting giant robot men, sentient piles of shit, and Power Rangers. But this was 1956, so at this point we're only 2 Godzilla movies in, which means that they decided that the natural, almost immediate follow-up to the original being like a somber reflection about the fallout of nuclear destruction in the Japanese population was a movie where Godzilla gets his shit stomped by a giant mummy GF robot, which they make the specific point to mention that he was enjoying very, very much. And while he is unbelievably real for that, it's also the same reason they end up having to detonate a nuclear bomb that they hid inside of her to finally put him out of his misery. That I know in my heart is the way that he would have wanted to go. Also, she would have killed Anguirus. No! Fuck! But, you know, fearing that the Godzilla franchise would never recover from peaking in the 3rd movie, in the end they shelved it so they could make the significantly less horny King Kong vs. Godzilla. And while you sit there and join me in processing the loss of what could have been the greatest movie ever made, I'm going to tell you about the sponsor of this shareholder meeting, ProtonVPN. I think it's so cool that when I'm on my deathbed in 5 years, that most of the life flashing before my eyes will be seeing how every movie night I've had in the last 5 years has had to involve an international manhunt to track down which of the 57 streaming apps I pay for has Thomas and the Magic Railroad, because Netflix in Germany is holding both it and 4 more seasons of Peppa Pig hostage. But with ProtonVPN, with just a click of a button, you can be free of being stuck in a country that has access to all 3 Kissing Booth movies, but only the 1st season of Jujutsu Kaisen for some reason, to change your location across 16,000 servers of more countries than I even knew existed on a VPN that works on every major device and streaming service, even made-up ones that no one has, like Paramount Plus. Unlike my mental health, Proton is faster and more secure than other VPNs, so you can best stop your ISP from selling off your data about how you have great taste in YouTube videos, and lets you access restricted sites in case you live in a hellhole like the UK and now have to bypass government-funded anti-gooning laws, and even comes with a built-in ad blocker in case you literally hate me. And you're watching this at a good time, because they got a Black Friday deal going on at the moment that gets you 75% off a ProtonVPN subscription running all the way to January if you use my link, protonvpn.com/diamondbolt. So, thanks to ProtonVPN for buying us a few more minutes, and now back to saving this company. So after Disney spent the ad revenue of a Mr. Beast video buying Star Wars, much like myself whenever I get to the talking stage, had no idea what they were doing. Because their plan to get back that investment as quickly as possible was for them to immediately start shitting out yearly Star Wars movies until one of them bombed so hard that it killed thousands of unmade projects. Not just the movies, but their games and spin-offs too. And since the last installment of their extremely beloved sequel trilogy came out in 2019, Star Wars has almost entirely existed in the form of like quarterly mid-as-fuck Disney Plus shows funded by 14 landfills worth of Baby Yoda merch. While on the movie side, it's basically been like 6 years of, alright guys, we're doing a Rogue Squadron movie. Okay, how about Rian Johnson doing a trilogy? Could do a Boba Fett movie. Or we could do a game. Guillermo del Toro Jabba the Hutt movie, fucking. And the only one of these that got like further than just a dude coming up with some shit over a lunch break was a Kylo Ren spin-off movie called The Hunt for Ben Solo. And you know, if you're wondering how this could take place after Rise of Skywalker when Kylo Ren died of cringe in that movie, congrats, you now have the same qualifications as a producer at Disney. Because despite them apparently having a completed script for it that they spent 2 years on, that even got approved by Lucasfilm, Disney just could not wrap their head around the idea of a Star Wars character coming back to life through some unplanned retcon bullshit, which of course has just never happened in the series before at any point. That I am like way more bummed about missing out on than every attempt to make a Sonic movie before the one that we got, because as it turns out, the one with the horrifying fucking rodent teeth was actually just like the end result of 30 years of even shittier ideas. None of which are as funny to me as the one that Sony was talking about doing in their leaked emails, where you can tell that he was in very good hands by the fact that they repeatedly refer to him as Sonic the Hedgehog. Sincerely, Dick. But then some financially irresponsible maniac dropped $2,000 on eBay to share with the world the very first story treatment for a Sonic movie from the 90s, that I am like 85% sure is real because it has a note on page 6 saying it isn't funny. To be fair to what I'm about to read to you, this was 1994, okay? Back when video game movies looked like this, and the newest Sonic game was this. So like, I don't know how you would have made a Sonic movie, but like, it probably wouldn't have been this. Sonic the movie would have been about a 17-year-old kid named Jimmy Hedgeman. Yes, that is real. I swear to God, I'm not making this up. And his scientist father, Dr. Hedgeman, who surprisingly wasn't going to be Eggman, because that was an entirely separate guy in the script called Dr. Ellison, who from his island of mutant experiments with the only other Sonic character in the movie, Knuckles, was planning to transform the world's population into a rainforest convention. But when Jimmy accidentally gets some blue sci-fi bullshit on him from his dad's experiments, he would have spent the rest of the movie slowly anamorphing into Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, just before you guys like immediately blow all of your life savings funding this movie, how about I take you back to the nightmare year of 2015? Back when Michael Bay was still allowed to make Transformers movies and had the idea to trap a bunch of innocent writers with families in a room for 3 weeks until they came up with the Transformers cinematic universe.
So we got 14 great writers. We put them through Transformer school. We locked them in a room for about a month.
And while they were allegedly allowed to leave, I don't know why they would have wanted to, when the room had a life-size statue of Bumblebee, a pinball machine, unlimited Transformers toys, and at least 1 jar of orange juice, all of which I would absolutely take over seeing my kids for almost a month. And while I'm sure you're surprised to hear that the later Transformers movies even had writers, in the end they apparently came up with like 12 different movies and spin-off ideas, only one of which we actually know anything about. A movie called Operation Skyfire, where someone dared to ask the question, what if the Autobots fought in World War II and Megatron teamed up with the guys who run Twitter? All we have to go off of this one is like a bunch of out-of-context concept art that gives us literally no explanation for where Megatron would get an army of robot Nazis, or why he was a train. But I gotta remind you guys that concept art does not mean that is what the final movie was gonna look like, which I know most of you are aware of, but there's always gonna be that one guy, okay? For example, these two from the Minecraft movie that both make me depressed for very different reasons. But the fact that we don't know like much about any of the other ideas they came up with, I'm sure is probably related to the fact that every photo of this writer's room looks like a memorial that you'd see on the news. But what we do know makes it sound like they had about as much creativity as 15-year-old me in his fanfiction.net account, because they were coming up with like King Arthur dragon Transformers and steampunk Transformers, and one set during the Roman Empire, famous for its abundance of technology that they could turn into, a giant freaking robot hand thing, and this one of the Quintessons, which were like these alien dudes from the original show. You don't care. Some or all of which may even be the same movie. Again, we really like know jack shit about what these guys were cooking. But in the end, while I'm sure most of it was probably rejected by Michael Bay for its lack of reference to like underage dating or robot testicles, some of it did actually end up being used in some of the Transformers movies that came out after, for better or worse. Definitely worse. Like, they shoved the King Arthur shit in basically like all of Operation Skyfire into like a 1-minute scene in the next movie that would end up being like the worst Transformers film ever made. So that was a really good use of a month of everyone's life.
You each attempted to give me a Transformers movie that's bad enough to end the series, and I honestly feel like you've all failed in that regard.
Despite us living in a timeline with 2 full seasons of Velma, it is actually unbelievably depressing how many cool-ass cartoon pitches and pilots go, like, absolutely nowhere. There was this, like, Spider-Verse-ass Batman Beyond pitch floating around that even DC was like, that shit looks fucking awesome. That's why we're absolutely not going to do that. There was going to be a live-action Ben 10 movie that they cancelled after failing for 10 years to make it look anywhere near as goated as the last one. There was Driftwood and a Cars spin-off about trains and a Plants vs. Zombies movie that I would bet money on somehow involving Jack Black. And also this page for an Adventure Time movie I found on maybe the most reliable source of all time, the cancelled movie Fanon Wiki, that confidently claims it was going to have the most expensive cast known to man with Chris Pratt, Zendaya, LeBron James, Danny DeVito, and James Gordon, who I'm sure is not a typo and they just actually mean the guy from Gotham. all of which of course I will take entirely at face value and not research any further at all. But I don't think any of these are as depressing as Learning with Pibby, which was like a 2-minute trailer / short pitch pilot thing that was dropped on Adult Swim's YouTube channel in 2021 that I can best describe to you as like a high-budget Dora the Explorer creepypasta where her show gets infected by what my grandma's computer looks like after I give her 15 minutes of unsupervised internet access. And they basically would have like hopped from show to show doing like, you guys ever played Kingdom Hearts? No, how about like Wreck-It Ralph? Yeah, there we go. That guy gets me.
Oh, you're gonna love it here.
But, you know, maybe it's a good thing that it never got picked up, considering that even just its 2-minute trailer was enough to divide the world between people who, like, still won't shut up about it 4 years later and also unironically like Friday Night Funkin', and an equal amount of people who understandably were not super keen on seeing Courage the Cowardly Dog get brutally murdered on live television. And, like, I'm not a lawyer, right, but it's kind of weird to me that, like, they were able to drop this trailer in the first place. They didn't already have the express approval to use all of these characters. I mean, they had friggin' Vegeta in the storyboard, so you can just do whatever the fuck you want on YouTube, I guess. Even after I, like, looked deeper into some of the concept material and found out that the darkness was meant to be memes. It was gonna be memes. You wouldn't know if you just saw the trailer, but this was meant to represent internet culture. The bad guy in this show was literally brain rot. I can't tell if that's genius or the dumbest fucking idea I've heard in my entire life.
What is this? The clouds are totally lit there.
The weird thing about Pibby, though, was that they went to the effort of, like, making a billboard for it. They had a whole hour on April Fool's Day where they edited her into, like, other Adult Swim shows, like Smiling Friends and Rick and Morty. And yet, after all of that, they still said no. But, you know, given the understandable legal nightmare of getting the permission to brutally murder, like, 40 years of cartoon history, this one had, like, about as much chance of coming out as me making a video with a good thumbnail. So anyway, that's what I got. I think we have some real potential with some of these ideas, okay? Oh, you guys left 15 minutes ago. Well, we're fucked.